Welcome to the Member Engagement Show, the podcast for association professionals, brought to you by Higher Logic. I'm your host, Kelly Whelan, and in each episode, we'll talk to guests whose expertise will help you gain new members, boost retention, and deepen member involvement, all goals that can transform your organization. I invite you to subscribe to the podcast so you don't miss an episode, and visit us at higherlogic.com/podcasts to catch the best of past episodes. Now, let's start the show. Welcome back to the Member Engagement Show. Today, I'm joined by Michael Jones, Vice President of Mobile Technologies at Results Direct. Michael uses his passion for technology and business to assist associations in leveraging mobile trends and opportunities to better engage their members. He leads the mobile practice at Results Direct, presents at a variety of forums on mobile technologies and best practices, and works directly with association leaders to create game-changing mobile solutions. I'm delighted to have him on the show today to share mobile strategies and best practices for associations and to tell folks about Higher Logic's newest offering, Higher Logic Thrive Mobile 365. Welcome, Michael.
Hello, Kelly. It's great to be here.
Thanks for joining us. Can you tell our listeners a little bit more about yourself in your own words and maybe share a little bit about Results Direct as well?
Well, let's see. Fun fact, I actually didn't start off in technology. I graduated college with a physics and math degree, but then promptly started my technology career as a software developer. So I was the guy they put in the corner, in front of a monitor to, write out code. But after several, iterations of that, I actually joined Results Direct 15 years ago now. And I keep track of it because that is the year that the Apple launched their App Store and apps became a thing. And that's really when I started with the organization with the intention of growing a mobile app division. And so it has been a lot of fun since then. Results Direct actually is celebrating their 30th year in business now that we have been serving associations and organizations with their technology needs. We do web development, web design, content management systems. We've been doing that the entire 3 decades. And then when I came on board, we really launched the mobile app division. And that's been a lot of fun. We started off doing custom and bespoke apps. And then from there, moved into developing several products and have had the opportunity to work with now organizations all over the world, which has been an absolute blast. So my role, in addition to, kind of overseeing the department overall, I do a lot of our product design. I do a lot of the strategy consulting. So I get to talk to really smart people about what they want to accomplish. And then one of my favorite hats actually is I get to wear the emerging technology hat. So anytime there's new tech out, basically I get to play with it and figure out, how it may impact the organizations we work with and how we want to incorporate it into our products. So, Kelly, do you remember when Google Glasses came out like forever ago?
Oh, yeah. It's so funny you bring that up because I feel like maybe I'm missing something, but it feels like nothing ever happened with them.
Well, yeah, I can validate that because I was the guy that they gave a pair to go walk around outside to see how people would react and who would hate on you and things like that. And so that was fun. And then, remember when Facebook changed their name to Meta, right? And everybody thought like we were all going to be living in VR after that. And so I actually was hosting, believe it or not, this is during COVID, I was hosting meetings with clients in my office in the metaverse, which was really fun. It just didn't really catch on. So, but and then obviously a lot of what I've been getting to pay attention to lately is AI and some of the different trends there. So it's been an interesting time for sure.
Yeah, that sounds super fascinating. Like kind of just because you're at the forefront of what technological advancements are happening and like digesting them to see if you need to like explain them to your clients and stuff. I'm sure you see like a lot of things that just kind of peter out, like just don't go anywhere.
Yeah, for sure. Although good news is that the ones that we tend to focus on really have stood the test of time, so web has done great forever. Mobile's been now solid for a decade and a half. And I do think that artificial intelligence is not going away. So it's been good.
Yeah, I love also what you called out. And I think this is one of the things that drew me to working with Higher Logic. I really enjoy hearing about brands that have that expertise or experience working with Higher Logic or with associations specifically, like Results Direct, like Higher Logic does, because I feel like associations have this like they're not like 100% unique. Like I understand there's like trends that are relevant to both like for-profit businesses, nonprofits, associations, but associations do have some unique challenges, and I think it really is helpful when they can work with an organization that's familiar with like the way that associations operate, so that they can think about those things that associations are going to run into that might be a challenge as they adapt certain technologies.
Yeah, I 100% agree with you. And it is an interesting time to be at an association. I think that there are a number of challenges right now that are out there that many organizations are facing, but I think many associations specifically. The fast pace of technology, that things are changing now so quickly, and keeping up with that and knowing what to invest time and resources into and what not. I think a lot of associations, have to operate within the realm of limited staff and limited budgets, and have to make smart decisions therefore with that. And really, I mean, even over just the last 15 years, there's always been competitors to the association, but it seems like even more so today, there's more and more opportunities for people within their constituency to get information or to network and to engage that doesn't involve the association at all. And so really it's keeping the associations as the most relevant focal point for whatever given industry that they serve. And so I think that those have been some of the biggest challenges they've seen. And then, really, the member engagement challenges that kind of tie into that. One of the interesting roles that I also get to play is, just keeping up on market trends. I get to read lots of benchmark reports from, different sources. We actually did our own benchmark report last year, and there's really some commonalities, So for example, one of the key things that we've seen kind of across all of the benchmark reports as one of the main challenges that associations are having is communicating the value of their membership. Why should someone become a member? Why should they continue to be a member? I know that, again, attracting new members is really big right now, and especially attracting and engaging with more early career professionals. Because again, as the next generation is sort of entering the workforce, their approach is a little different. They are looking at, they're not necessarily just going to join the association because others have done so. And then being able to cut through the noise or cut through the clutter when they're delivering information and being able to reach members effectively. These are some of the biggest things that we've seen, as challenges that organizations are facing. And of course, the opportunities. Most of the organizations that we work with, they usually have a couple of key objectives. Many of them, they want to grow membership. They want more members. They want to increase retention of members. They want to increase revenue, especially non-dues revenue sources. They want to increase the engagement they have with their members. Maybe, especially for those that run big events, they want to have more engagement between events and things like that. So there's a lot of opportunities, I think, as well, that the technology and some of the strategies that are out there are helping with.
And I appreciate kind of everything you just covered, Michael, because I feel like that's a great level set for where associations are at and kind of the things that they're facing. And that leads me into kind of one of my questions for you, which was, given the work that you do and the challenges and opportunities that you've just listed that associations are facing, what would you say are some of the ways that mobile technology trends and applications for mobile technology, how can those help associations with some of those challenges?
Yeah, no, that is a great question, Kelly. First off, I think it helps if we humanize our members. In other words, if we think about ourselves, right? So myself, Kelly, for you, probably for most people listening, if they think about how they run their day, and I know different verticals for different associations have different percentages of people that are in an office versus people that are in the field or whatever may be happening. But, the reality is that to really fully engage, you want to be where your members are when they need or want you. And when we think about it from that perspective, there's really only kind of three places that an association is really going to interface and engage with their members. It is either going to be on their computer, it'll be on their phone, or it's going to be face-to-face at some sort of a live event. Those are, I mean, maybe there's some outliers, but those are kind of the main three places that happens. And what's interesting is that as we look at sort of stats as they've evolved over the last 15 years, we've seen this progression where more and more people are spending more and more time on their mobile devices versus what traditionally would have been their desktop or their laptop or things like that. Even people that work primarily in an office environment. I won't go quoting a whole bunch of stats, but people can look these up, from ComScore or some of these other sources. But the idea that, across multiple countries, multiple demographics, we've seen that the desktop only audience is getting smaller. The mobile only audience is getting bigger, but the majority of people are really operating within both of these two major interfaces. And so that's one of the things that we've really focused on is, as Results Direct as a company, is that web interface, that mobile interface, and that event interface. Those are kind of our three big areas, if you will, that we've spent a lot of time and, research and building technology to support that. And then the other thing I think that's interesting is when you look at within mobile specifically, how people are spending their time. I mean, at this point, most everybody who is in a target demographic for an association has a smartphone. I mean, very, very rarely will you find someone that doesn't. But when you look at the usage stats of how the average person spends time on their mobile device, the amount of time that they spend in an app versus using a desktop or a mobile browser is radically different. I mean, it's literally 5 to 6 times more time spent in native apps than in the browser experience. And so because of that, it really kind of lends itself to this idea that where historically, I think for a long time, people felt that having a website was a requirement. I mean, since the mid 90s, right? If you didn't have a website, you were out of business. And I still agree to that's probably true today. But I think they felt that having an app for their association was very optional. And I think those days are long over because of the stats, because of the ways people are engaging, that is a huge missed opportunity if they're not leveraging mobile as one of those primary interface points, which kind of brings us to a concept that I really like. The idea that there's really 4 major engagement opportunities that associations can have using a mobile app. And I like to call these the 4 C's. I'll have to get that trademarked, I think, right? But the 4 C's, right? And so the 4 C's, basically break down to community, content, conferences, and communications. So these are kind of our 4 big areas, and it makes sense. So for many associations, and just to kind of break this down for one quick minute, for many associations, if they run events, having an event app was the first easy entry point for bringing mobile to their members. Because again, it's the place where people have left their office, they're in a new city, they're in a new location, nobody's walking around with a laptop in front of their face, attempting not to run into anybody. So the idea of having an event app that would be an interactive schedule, and really event apps have done a ton to enhance the overall event experience, because in addition to knowing, where sessions are and what I want to attend, it also is great because it has networking tools in it. It has gamification tools in it. There's ways for the organizer to communicate last minute changes. I mean, there's so many things that an event app does now to enhance the overall value of someone attending an event that most organizations, it's a no-brainer that they're going to have that.
I don't want to throw off your groove, but in my own experience as well, having the event app instead of like print materials was very powerful for the association from a cost savings perspective, and just like information is completely up to date perspective. Like when I started at an association, we're printing like 120 page conference guide with all of our like 300 sessions. And then by the time I left that association, we had an app, and it was way easier, and at the end of the day, cheaper to have the mobile app.
Absolutely. I would say the vast, vast majorities of organizations that I've worked with over the years, when you factor in what you just shared, which is, the cost savings for printing, shipping, et cetera, last minute inserts that go in for changes.
Yeah, there was always a last minute insert.
Exactly. When you factored that all in, literally then factoring in monetization opportunities, to do advertising and sponsoring and exhibitor lead scanning and things like that, all of a sudden the app becomes a profit center for the association versus using print and things of that nature. So no, I I 100% agree with you. And I think that's why, again, that's kind of an easy trend. And I think most people probably listening who work for an association, their organization already uses an event app of some sort, right? The key is that if that's all they use it for, they're only getting a slice of the engagement opportunity. Because then when you start looking at content, right, so all of the organizations that we work with have some type of content, right? Whether it's, articles or newsletters or publications or continuing education or advocacy materials or whatever it is, they have all of this different content. And again, the key is, how do people get to it? How do people find it? And is it available to them, when they need it, especially if they don't happen to be in front of their computer at that moment? Then we could talk about community. Obviously, community is such a powerful engagement opportunity, because now you're talking about not necessarily just organization to member, but now you're talking about peer level communication, member to member. And for many organizations, that's the lifeblood of why people are joining, is that network, if you will. And we all know, my gosh, we all do our community, whether it's through traditional social channels like Facebook or X or whatever, we have, that we do those through our phone. The majority of people are on their phone doing social. And so the idea of bringing community into that, and that brings us to communication. And Kelly, this is the one that I think most people probably haven't realized the value of, because when we talk about how associations communicate proactively with their members, it's basically email. That's kind of all you get, right? Because, maybe they call them on the phone. I don't know, right? But the idea is that all of those outgoing things are email. Everything else, the member has to come to you. They got to go to your social profile. They got to go to your website. They got to take some action. And so the thing is with mobile is it opens up an entirely new communication channel, where now, because members have the app on their phone, that now you can send a push notification and you can literally buzz their pocket in real time. You can show up on their lock screen. And that type of real-time engagement doesn't really exist anywhere else. And that empowers everything that we're talking about, because that could be a push notification to say, hey, registration's open for the upcoming event. Now you're increasing event attendance. It could be, someone just replied to a discussion thread that you started and you just got a reply. Now that happens in real time. We're not waiting for an email digest. We're not waiting for someone to just wander back into the thread. Now it's something that's actually really providing real-time engagement. And so those four, and here's what's crazy is, if we talk about the Thrive app for 1 second, is that, the Thrive Mobile 365 app can support any of those individual use cases, right? Any of the 4 C's. But where the real power comes in, I believe, is there's a synergy bringing more of those together. So like if you bring all 4 of those into one app, that becomes really powerful, because now all of them are influencing each other and essentially adding value to each one back. And so it really is a case where the sum is greater than the value of the individual parts, hence the definition of synergy.
That makes a lot of sense. And I feel like it even starts to answer one of my follow-up questions for you, which was going to be, if an association, for example, has a mobile responsive website, what would you say is the value add from an actual mobile app? And I feel like you're already getting at that. Like just the fact that with a mobile app, you can do these push notifications, you can make sure that people are coming back as opposed to just engaging for a moment and then maybe not logging in for another month.
Yeah. And I'll use this moment to say that it's not a competition really, in the sense that, it's funny, and this dates me a little bit, but when I first started with Results Direct, and responsive web, we were one of the first organizations to build responsive websites for associations. When we were doing it, I'm like, no one else is doing this yet, right? But we used to say something like, if your website's not responsive, you're going to be out of business or whatever, something crazy, right? But it's true that everyone's website really needs to be responsive, because there's a use case for that, right? But it's a very reactive use case. And I think that's the big difference, is that having a responsive website is more reactive. Having a native app is more proactive. So if we take that lens and we apply it to the 4 C's of engagement, if we're talking about content, content's great on both. In other words, you can look at content in the browser, you can look at content in the native app, and they're both going to be good experiences. Maybe one is a little bit better than the other in terms of presentation or layout, but overall, you can really do the job great in both. But if you're talking about communications, that doesn't happen on a website. You'd have to have the app to be able to do proactive push notifications and things like that. When we talk about conferences, I mean, the experience at a conference of using, some sort of a web browser schedule versus a native app that has been optimized for, hitting on all of those things we talked about earlier around, networking and gamification and, QR code scanning and all of these other pieces. I mean, that's a night and day experience, right? And then when we talk about community, community in a browser, not as good for sure from maybe just an engagement or an interaction standpoint. But my gosh, the biggest differentiator there goes back to communications. Because again, if it's just browsing it through the web, there's no way for people to know, oh, hey, there's something new, right? Whereas again, if it's through a native app, now you've got that real-time push notification that lets someone actually have a real-time dialogue through the native app because they're both getting alerted when they're getting responses. So it's just really, I think, the importance of understanding that in the modern times now, both are really required, because they are different use cases. I'll say too, it also just has an added benefit as a native app that you get that real estate on the phone, that it's that reminder of the brand where I open up my phone and I'm seeing there's an icon or there's the label or there's the push notification on my lock screen, that it's just incorporating the end user, the member, into that experience a lot better. And then in many ways, it's actually training the member on how to engage better. I guess I'll break that down for 1 second. If I'm a member and I have a question about something in my industry and I'm on my phone, the odds that I'm going to go to my browser on my phone, type in the URL of my association to go try to find an answer to my question are very, very small. Most of the time, people are going to maybe open up their browser and go to Google, or maybe they're just going to be like, "Hey Siri," "Hey Google," whatever, and they're just going to ask the question. And now what's going to happen is it's going to completely depend on how good the SEO is for that website, whether that member even ends up at the association. So this idea, that's why I say it's very reactive. Whereas again, the idea with the mobile side is with a good cadence of communication, for example, and there's definitely best practices there, not to overload them with pushes, too many or too little, right? But the idea with the cadence of communication, you're actually retaining awareness. That's how I like to refer to it. That, hey, the association's here, the value we add, here's what it is. And oh, by the way, we're on your phone, And I think that's important because again, when we talk about best practices for apps, one of the downsides, you probably, Kelly, I'm guessing, if you were to open up your phone right now and swipe through the first couple of pages of apps on your phone, there's probably apps about page 3 that you don't even remember what they do. You downloaded it for some reason and now you're like, I couldn't tell you, right?
Yeah. I think that's kind of why, even as you were talking about like the initial wave of like event focused apps, now we're kind of getting beyond that, because I feel like when I used to download an app for an event, as soon as that event is over, I delete it from my phone. I'm like, yes. I don't need this. The event is over. I don't need to be in here. Whereas if you're like going to an association conference and you download the app because you realize, oh, this will make it easier for me while I'm at the event. Now, if that has value, ongoing value, you don't delete it from your phone because you're getting that ongoing value after the event is over too.
And it also helps on the event side because, since I know the Thrive Mobile 365 app supports an unlimited event usage. So a lot of times you'll see organizations using it for the bigger events, also their smaller events. You'll see repeat users year over year. So again, it that's what I mean when I say it benefits like all of the different departments within the association. It benefits them all to have them working together.
And it really overlaps with what we've talked about recently from our community benchmark report, which we had a webinar on at the end of September, where we really, even in the data, saw that having that holistic approach where different initiatives are all funneling into the community and the community is feeding back into those initiatives. And now via an app, potentially you have the app making it easier to access the community and everything. all of that holistic approach is kind of what people want now in terms of how they're engaging with things. They don't want to have to go to all these separate places for things. They want that holistic experience of, I can access all of my benefits from my association through one portal that has everything I need.
Absolutely. It's interesting. When I first started with Results Direct, there was this concept at the time of the killer app, right? And the definition of the killer app is it did one thing, but it did it absolutely fantastic. And, and there was some thought within the association space that would be the way to go, that essentially your association would offer a suite of apps. There'd be one for your publications and one for your community and one for your events. And they would all be really, really good. And people would kind of install this suite of apps. And that did not take off, I will say. And I think part of it is because, again, going back to the challenges that we started with, I think that a lot of times the battle is in getting the member to take the step of just installing one app on their phone. It's that, again, it doesn't matter how great an app is. If it doesn't get installed or it doesn't get opened, then it doesn't provide value, right? And so how do you get members to download the app in the first place, right? And what we found is that this, again, is where having that multi-engagement point strategy is so valuable, because now we can say, okay, it's our event app, but if we want to do a great job of marketing it, we'll get most everybody who attends, they're going to download it, right? But then just like you said, now by effectively communicating to them, oh, hey, by the way, this isn't just for the event. You could use this all year round, right? Then you've got other people maybe don't go to the event, but they want to engage with the community. And so now you're communicating out to those members, hey, the best way to engage with the community is using our mobile app. And so they download it for that. Maybe you've got other people that they just want to incorporate this into their daily or weekly routine of staying current on the industry. So they just want to stay up on what's the latest policy changes, what's the latest news articles, what's, et cetera, that association is putting out there. So they're incorporating it into their regular routine, if you will, for that. And so you've got all these different reasons why someone would want to download it. But once it's on the phone, once it's in the member's pocket, now that association can leverage that to start cross-marketing the other member benefits. So great, you're a part of the community. By the way, registration just opened for the event. Great, you're signed up, you're going to attend this event. By the way, here's the latest news article. That's really where we start to see engagement numbers increasing, both in terms of the frequency of engagement, the number of people engaging, but also the breadth of content that they start engaging with. And again, that leads to retention. You're appealing more to your younger members, who are more technology savvy, or, et cetera. All of the good things that we talked about in terms of opportunities start to play out as you start to bring those engagement metrics up.
Yeah, I love everything that you just said, Michael. And I think you, again, are kind of answering questions I had about, like, if you have an association that's starting to use an app. I know when my association first started using and it was just a conference app, but our biggest challenge was that adoption piece of like getting people oriented to it. And I was going to ask you if you had some tips for orienting members to a mobile app or ensuring mobile app adoption. And you've kind of touched on them already, but is there anything else that you would add to that?
Oh yeah, we could dive into that. So I think that there's a couple of different ones, right? But when it comes to events specifically, so it's funny, I wrote an article for our client base back in 2019, and it was basically how to increase app downloads and engagement, the marketing campaign, right? And it's probably the most valuable article I've written for our clients, like ever, okay? Because what we found is that by following some simple best practices, most of the organizations that applied it were getting 90% plus download rates at their events, right? So it was really good. But the idea was basically that, number one, obviously have good content, and that I think applies across the board to events. It applies to year-round content. It applies to community. it needs to be fresh. It needs to be, in other words, you can't, if somebody, goes to the app and then they go to the app a week later and nothing's changed, right? Then it's like, well, okay, nothing's here, right? So the idea is it's that keeping it fresh, keeping it relevant, keeping it valuable, right? So that's kind of the first thing. But the second thing we saw was that it was really important to be able to communicate to the attendee or to the member, but communicate to the attendee what's in it for them. And I think that's the piece that so often is missed. Is it's like someone says, oh, go download our app. Well, why? What's in it for me to download the app? So you have to kind of spell it out, and it's like, well, hey, download. And we actually recommend kind of a series of a couple of different emails. And like, it might be, hey, you can create your personalized schedule. And then the next email is, hey, did you know that you can be networking now with people before you get there? And then the next one is, hey, you should check out our sponsors, and then, I always tell people the last one should be a FOMO, right? Which is, do you want to be the only one standing in the room because we changed it? At the last minute, we had to have a room change for a session, and everyone else knew because it was in the app and you're standing there by yourself, right? And so this idea that you can communicate this value, that does a tremendous job. And then, there's some other things on site, that can be done as well to kind of capture those last people. But there's definitely some best practices on the event side that have proven, worthy over the test of time. The other thing I would say, especially when we talk about a member app, is it is about over communication. It is not the field of dreams, right? You will build the app and they will show up. No, they won't. You have to tell them. And so the organizations we've worked with that have been most successful, yeah, they put it on the website. They did an email campaign. They've highlighted it at their events. They've really taken the time to make sure that the word has gotten out so that more and more of the membership will download it. And it is really interesting for us to see organizations that, within their first year, get to 70, 80% of membership. By year 2, they've reached basically, the vast majority of their members. And again, once that occurs, now you've got that communication platform. You can start, my gosh, how cool would it be just to be able to send a push notification to people that they need to renew next month? Hey, your renewal's up, click this link. That's when you start talking about, oh, that's a revenue metric right there, So it does open up a lot of really cool opportunities.
Yeah, that all makes a ton of sense. And I love that kind of the way you described onboarding someone to the app. To me, sounds so similar to the way that like associations should be onboarding their members to their membership too. So it's like a familiar cadence of get people used to what the value they're getting is. And you do that for your membership anyway. So you could also do that for an app. The other thing that it kind of reminded me of was a Higher Logic Association member experience report. I think last year's members responded to the survey saying they really only like engage with something from their association like once a month. Mm-hmm. And I feel like that underscores both the importance of what you said, over communicating, because you're not actually over communicating because people are like just not opening a bunch of your emails. If they really only engage with you once a month, they're not opening the email you send every week. So you got to remind them repeatedly that you have this new opportunity for them to engage. And then hopefully, as you have an app, you actually see that, oh, I engage with my community once a month. Hopefully that would actually go up because That's now right. They have such easy access to the community and to their member benefits right on their phone.
That's exactly right.
Well, before we wrap up, I did have a question. For some associations, exploring a mobile app might be a totally new thing, but I think maybe some other associations have tried using an app before and had it fail. Mm-hmm. So I wonder if you have any advice or best practices you could share with associations for just trying to make sure their app is successful. I know a lot of what we talked about with adoption is key to that, and I just wonder if you have anything else to add.
When it comes to why an organization would have launched an app and had it fail. Obviously the first question is, how did it fail? Did the technology fail? Most of the time it's no one downloaded it. That's usually the fail metric, right? We had low adoption, especially when compared oftentimes to the cost. So there are a couple of things that I think are really important. One, obviously the technology is really important. You have to have good technology that works, that, can be flexible enough to meet the needs that you have. And it's one of the reasons, again, I'm excited about the Thrive Mobile 365 product, is because it is bringing all 4 of those engagement elements together into one platform. And it's flexible enough to be adaptive. It's got a real-time content management system behind it. So people can add content and make things happen right away and have that level of control and things like that. I think that's an important part, but it also is that adoption and the strategy part. I think we've talked about adoption a lot, but the combination of these different pieces and also just, using some of these best practices to make sure that it gets into people's hands, and then really incorporating that cadence of communication to keep it relevant to them so it doesn't get lost and buried in the background of their phone. The other thing I think I would say is that it goes back to keeping the content fresh. Working with associations for years now, I've just come to accept there will never be a staff member whose title is like chief mobile app person. You know what I mean? So the idea is that the mobile app really needs to be able to be lightweight in terms of management, how people can use it, the amount of time invested. So one of the things that we've really focused on is leveraging integrations. So in other words, letting the mobile app be part of the technology stack, pulling content from those sources so that things don't have to be done in a manual fashion. They can be automated. Also being able to automate as much as possible so that, when, there is new content that it's being kept up with. And then the other thing is making sure that when it comes to the communication standpoint, that whoever in the organization is responsible for that, the marketing communications person who's sending the emails, who's doing the social posts, that, the app and notifications and push notifications, that those are in the mix, maybe not with the same frequency. If they're sending an email every 2 days, don't send that many push notifications. People get upset. But the idea is that the most important or relevant ones are getting sent out through the app as well. I think that's been really important. The cost effectiveness. So this one I think is really, really big. I've had conversations with organizations who spent a lot of money. I mean, I've had a couple conversations with orgs that spent 7 figures building an app for their organization. And I will be astounded at times when that happens, mostly because, well, actually, I'll give you a funny story, Kelly. So when we first started building apps back in the early days, I mean, this is literally 14 years ago now, we were building one-off apps, right? And what we realized is the amount of money it costs to build a one-off app, custom app, like almost no association could afford. And that's why we went to a platform model, was the idea that if you have a platform, you get all of these benefits, that we're updating it, we're making sure it's staying current with the stores and policies and things like that. The fact that, it provides ever increasing amount of functions and features, as far as the product evolves without someone having to pay more money for it. And basically they get access to something that's a 7-figure, maybe 8-figure app now. And they get it for a itty bitty little fraction of the cost because of the fact that they're using it as part of, a platform, right? And so the fact that with that level of cost effectiveness combined with revenue opportunities, it really makes it easier to kind of go in and be successful with it without it having be a huge hit to the organization from a budget perspective or even a huge risk. In fact, in many cases, organizations are already spending money on an event app. They could use the Thrive, Mobile 365 app, and it's probably in the same ballpark range, in terms of that, but they would get all of the additional benefit. So I think that's a big thing too. Last thing I'll just say is that, and this is a challenge I don't expect easy solutions to for most organizations, because an app like the Thrive app does allow for benefits across different departments. It really does help to see that collaboration and cooperation between departments, because when it's done well, the marketing team, they're able to, have, information about the association. Why are we, membership why should you join? Right. The advocacy team, that's another one I love, right? Is, we've got we built a number of advocacy apps over the years. And the only problem was the only people who downloaded them were people that were already engaged in advocacy, and so when you look at it, now all of a sudden you have this app and you've got 80% of your members have downloaded it. Well, now you can send out an action alert, to, sign a form, a petition, whatever. And all of a sudden It's like, oh, we just reached 80% of our membership with this, with a link to take 3 minutes and fill this out.
I feel like my former association, there were so many opportunities for us as an organization to contribute to public comment because it was a research ethics organization. And we genuinely wanted more of the members' input. Like, yes, we had experts on the board and our speakers and our executive director who were experts, and they could write the response to public comment, but we wanted the members to be able to weigh in and to know that we were doing it. And sometimes that was so challenging because they would come up so often that there was no way to like just keep people totally on top of like, oh, hey, this very short window of public comment just opened for this particular regulation. We want you to weigh in. And as you're describing this, I feel like if we had an app where you could get a push notification, especially if people opted in specifically to hear about advocacy, that would be huge.
That's exactly right. I call it the Starbucks effect because, like, if you go to anywhere these days, right? But and there's a line. What's everybody in line doing? They're all staring at their phone. Could you give them a task they could do before they have to get up and order their latte? Again, it's a benefit. So all of the different departments, all of the different member benefits, they actually enhance each other if they collaborate and work together through the app. So it is something that, again, we've tried to make it easy to manage, low staff, hours involved, high return on, investment, both financially and engagement, and then also just serving the industry.
First of all, thank you so much for sharing all your insights. I don't know if there's anything else that you feel like you would call out to listeners about either mobile apps in general or about HireLogic Thrive 365.
No, I'll just say that I am very excited about the Thrive app because to me, it's essentially the result of a decade plus of vision, strategy. I've been wanting to do this for a long time to kind of bring all four of these elements together into one app. And so really seeing this now come to fruition, I'm just very, very excited about it. And then obviously very excited about our partnership with HireLogic. Fun fact, we've been partnered with them and collaborating with them since HireLogic was founded. We used to have a data center back before AWS, and HireLogic's first websites were hosted with us in our
Oh my gosh, that's wild.
I know. And then we've been doing apps with you all now literally for about 12, 13 years. And so this is really sort of the next big iteration of a very long-standing and very successful partnership.
So awesome. That's amazing. Thank you again so much for coming on the show. And I want to share with listeners, we'll make sure that there's a link in the show notes. So if you want to learn more about HireLogic Thrive Mobile 365, there will be a link that you can go to. Additionally, I'll include a link in the show notes for Results Direct's website so that you can find additional mobile best practices and resources from them as well. And otherwise, I hope to have you all tune in next time.